Well, it's been a heck of a week for Michigan once again. Feels like this team has been in the headlines at least once every other 2 months for whether it be controversy, whether it be a statement that their star quarterback says. Look, is publicity always good? Well, that might just fuel the fire for the Michigan Wolverines as they prepare for the 2026 season. Lots to talk about today on another edition of our State of the Program series. Welcome on in. My name is Lucas Hill here of the Southern Sports Scene. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure to do us a favor and hit the like, share, and subscribe button down below. Turn on the bell notifications so that you are notified every time we go live, posting a video or posting a short here on the Southern Sports Scene. As always, we will want to thank our good friends and partners over at FrostBuddy. Going over to frostbuddy.com. Use the promo code SSS15 to get 15% off your first purchase. Also, thank you to our friends at Chike Nutrition. 20 grams of protein, 1 gram of fat, and 1 gram of sugar in every healthy, hearty cup of iced coffee. And as always, we want to thank our good friends at Buzzer for allowing us to use their platform to post our videos, post our live streams. If you want to become a verified creator today, download the Buzzer app today. See what you can do to become part of one of the fastest social media platforms on the market. We got Michelle with us, Michigan football social media guru of sorts. But hey, when you compare her and Swanky, it's kind of neck and neck in my opinion. But Michelle, thank you for taking the time to come and talk with us. We appreciate you hopping on the Southern Sports Scene.
Thank you so much for having me. I cannot put myself anywhere in the same universe as Swinky Wolverine. He is a legend. But I am very happy to be here today to talk Michigan football. It is my favorite subject.
Michelle, a lot has gone on the last it feels like it's been a week-long process when in reality, really the biggest news just kind of broke on Sunday. Warde Manuel, there's been back and forth. He's going to be let go at the end of the week. He's not going to be let go. He went on Sam Webb's show earlier today to address all of the issues. I don't know if you got a chance to watch the interview, but I watched bits and pieces of it. It seemed to me that he's obviously trying to cover for himself, which, I mean, who wouldn't at this point in time? But I'm very torn on what to decide because on one hand, you have an athletic director that is responsible for the hiring of, or really was around for two coaches that end up winning national championships in the span of 3 years. But you're also on your third coach in your two major sports in basketball and football. I wanted to hear your thoughts on this whole situation with Warde Manuel. What do you think the outcome should be? And do you believe that this is the curtain call on the 10-year tenure of Warde Manuel as your athletic director?
I mean, I don't think any athletic director in the country has more lives than Warde Manuel. It feels like, every so often we're hearing calls for his termination pretty frequently. And no surprise, Michigan is, first of all, a university that prides itself on being above reproach. And yet our athletic department, at least with regard to football in particular, has been a hot mess in terms of off the field controversies, some a little bit on the field stuff too, but it makes sense, right, that there would be calls for some change there. I sort of bought the bait on Sunday when they said he was out. It made sense to me. Now it seems like they may be negotiating an exit. I did not get a chance to listen to Sam Webb's interview with him today. What I saw from other accounts I know and respect suggests that maybe Warde got some softballs, had an opportunity to defend himself, sort of said exactly what you would expect him to say. When confronted, had an answer for everything, perhaps individually. What I think a lot of Michigan fans struggle with is he may have an answer for each isolated incident, but it's the collection of incidents. It's the fact that there have just been so many that I think leads many of us, notwithstanding the national titles, we're all grateful for the national titles, but leads us to believe that a change needs to be made, especially as more and more information comes out suggesting that the athletic department under Warde's tenure had knowledge as to some of the stuff that was going on and failed to act. That's where I think that gets particularly sticky for him, right? He didn't hack the computers. He didn't steal the signs, as far as I know.
Right.
But, somebody has to be responsible, and it's ultimately him. So I would like to see him go, if for no other reason than I am just so sick of talking about the Connor Stallion stuff, the sign stuff, the Sharon Moore stuff. Every single Michigan fan I know is ready to move on from that. And I think until we have a full change of the guard at the top, it's going to be difficult to do.
I've been kind of in the same boat. I have done everything I can. I've defended Connor Stallions. I have basically been on record and said, look, every single program in the United States has done this at one point. The only issue is that the reason why this got so big is because you're dealing with a true blue blood in college football, a team that won a national championship, and a guy that was essentially the scapegoat was a defensive assistant that knew how to detect signs. And I watched the Netflix documentary, and people obviously have mixed reviews. I'm of the opinion that for the most part, I think he might have done some things that were outside of the book, but you're talking about a really, really, really smart football mind that Connor Stallions was. That's where I stand on that. But you mentioned the incidents.
Yeah.
24 in the past 10 that were notable, but in my opinion, it's 3 or 4 that really kind of take the cake and are really kind of defining Warde Manuel right now, because I look at the others and I see them that were kind of out of his hands. You have the dead period recruiting rules that were violated during the COVID years. You have the Chris Partridge situation several years ago. The NCAA ends up clearing him. Now he's in the middle of a lawsuit, which just gotten started, about 4 months ago. The Matt Weiss computer hacking situation. The Connor Stallions deals. And now you have all the things going on with the alleged Shiver situation with Sharon Moore. And now you have allegations that he was well aware of this relationship. He didn't put an end to it. And now this is where we're at today. Out of all of those, do you think that there was anything that the higher ups, say the board or anybody like that, they could have done to kind of put a stop to this?
It's really tricky. Actually, I think it's interesting to look back at what happened with Michigan State and Mel Tucker, right? Yes. By the way, these are happening in the same state, right? So you've got a head football coach at Michigan State, Mel Tucker, who is accused of some inappropriate behavior. Granted, that was not a romantic relationship like this was, but he was accused of sexually harassing one of the vendors. And there were a lot of questions.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Was this over the phone?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And Michigan State got sued by Mel Tucker, right? After terminating him, they said for cause. He disagreed as to whether it was for cause. But what resulted from that was things got very messy. I still actually don't think that lawsuit is resolved, but things got very messy for Michigan State because there was arguments to be made as to whether they had all of their ducks in a row from an evidence perspective before making that decision. So Michigan is operating with that happening in the same state, right? Where it maybe has rumblings, inklings of something going on with an assistant. We don't actually know. I think the law firm in conducting this investigation for millions and millions of dollars obviously knows more than I do. But there's a risk for any employer to pull the trigger and fire someone for inappropriate conduct in any situation without a complete and thorough investigation. Do I think that they should have been more aggressive in their early investigations? I mean, everyone in the media seems to think that this was an open secret within the football program. Seems like players knew, other people on staff knew. So yes, I do think there was a little bit of like an ostrich head in the sand thing going on there, where they were just kind of going to wait and see how the season played out. Quite honestly, it is. The other thing is, this is a football school. Right. It's really disruptive when you fire your head football coach in the middle of the season, right? Can't really go out and get another one. Who's going to replace Sharon Moore if you terminate him in, October or September earlier? So these are all things that I'm sure went into the equation. That doesn't necessarily make that decision making right or correct. And I suspect that Paige Shiver will argue that they should have known and they should have acted faster than they did. I think the public is going to argue that too. But there's a lot happening. This decision, or how quickly or how slowly they made it, does need to be viewed in the context of what happened to other football coaches who were fired for similar behaviors, and then what Michigan's alternatives were as a football program if they did pull the trigger when they did. So just a really complex situation. Right. Not defending Michigan, just highlighting, I think, the fact that this is not necessarily super black and white. And then I think there was an ongoing question too as to the extent to which this relationship was voluntary, because you could suspect that there's something going on between Sharon Moore and Paige Shiver. But if she denies it and he denies it, and she's not coming forward and saying anything, are your hands tied? I don't know. It's hard to say, right? But it's just, I think, should be viewed in the appropriate context.
From what I have heard from some people that I have talked to, I could be incorrect, but from what I heard, this relationship was known to some of the media.
Yeah, I've heard people on podcasts say like, "Oh, I'm not surprised after everything happened." I'm like, Jesus, like how many people knew this was going on?
And it's crazy that this was kind of kept as a backroom secret, and it was just waiting until the right time. And this was kind of mentioned from one outlet and another outlet very, very briefly, but it wasn't all the way with them saying, hey, this isn't Sharon's first run-in with a young lady that he might have been engaged in a relationship with, which I think was crazy to me because I'm from the state of Louisiana. We don't necessarily get that type of news unless we look on, social media, especially when it comes to things like that. But it just came as a surprise to me, just hearing Sharon on camera when he speaks, and then seeing the outside world kind of say some other things about him. It's still one I'm very skeptical of, but again, who knows at this point. But when all of this is said and done, whether Warde Manuel remains at the university or not, what do you think that the punishment could be if the NCAA does step in and do something about this? Because I've been told that this could be a Big Ten situation where Tony Petitti could step in, kind of like what Brett Yormark did with Texas Tech, and you have some schools that sue their respective schools. Do you see a similar situation unfolding if this continues?
No, I have 0% concern that this is going to. First of all, there was no NCAA violation. The NCAA is limited in what it governs, right? Like they have certain rules. You can't bet on sports. You can't engage in advanced in-person scouting. That rule was almost repealed. But they have certain rules, right? There are other things that are governed by the criminal laws of individual states, but those fall really outside the purview of the NCAA's governance and ability to impose penalties. So I, for one, would be really surprised. This also doesn't impact play in any manner whatsoever. The reason why the Big Ten was able to intervene so quickly with regard to the Connor Stallion situation was because of their sportsmanship policy, because people viewed the advanced scouting. Sign stealing is legal. Advanced scouting was the more questionable practice. They viewed the advanced scouting as compromising the integrity of competition and violating the sportsmanship policy, which is pretty vague. That's how the Big Ten could assert itself so quickly. But there is nothing here that impacts play in any manner whatsoever. And in fact, I really just don't see how or what it would be. It would otherwise fall under Title IX. I believe Title IX was the mechanism through which Michigan State faced potential consequences and repercussions for the Mel Tucker behavior. And it would be Title IX under which I think the Sharon Moore stuff could potentially reach and impact Michigan. But that's not going to come with any sort of, I don't think, program sanctions related to this. I don't think. Now, as I say all of this, I'm remembering in my head the Penn State situation, right? Which was disgusting and horrible and certainly criminal in nature, but also served as the grounds for the NCAA to impose some pretty devastating sanctions on Penn State. That said, I have not heard any rumblings of the NCAA inserting itself here. Again, because by all appearances, this was a consensual relationship until it wasn't. But, there's this, I am not aware of any allegations of sexual assault. The way that we saw, obviously, with the whole really devastating situation at Penn State. So, yeah, I'm curious sort of where you've heard that, because that has not hit my radar.
The reason why I asked is because I've heard a lot of people talking about how this could potentially be a lack of institutional control situation, potentially could lead to some other things. But I think what is so different now, that even if in the very small chance that the NCAA does end up getting involved, loss of scholarships isn't going to really affect much, because we live in the landscape of NIL. Go look at teams like Florida. Cormani McClain was a walk-on. They ended up paying for most of what he was offering, and I think that he got a pretty good NIL package as well. How much of a fine would they receive? Well, you're already in the middle of a $30 million fine from the advanced scouting deal, which really wasn't, in my opinion. But it doesn't feel like the hammer has dropped at all for Michigan. And I know that there's a lot of people that are complaining and have talked about how it should, but I struggle to find something that it relates to how this affected athletic-wise, except for the Title IX violations, which obviously will and probably will involve a lot of things, a la the Santa Ono situation, where you have him hacking into computer. What is it with hacking into computers? You have the Santa Ono situation. You have the Matt Weiss situation. Both of those obviously Title IX violations. Could that ultimately come back to haunt Michigan at the end of the day?
Certainly with regard to liability and damages, but I understand that those suits are directed at the university. So, I mean, the university.
They're not directed with athletics at all.
I don't think so. Maybe Warde was named as the supervisor of Weiss. I'd have to go back and check on the specifics, but I don't think they're going to carry any sort of penalties specific to the football program, because those are being civilly adjudicated. So there will be damages assessed, but look, those are going to come out of the university's pocket ultimately. I do, though, think it's important to circle back to what the public thinks should happen to Michigan, because I've heard a lot of people say Michigan was never punished for the advanced scouting, right? And they are like, especially when the whole Texas Tech thing was going on.
Yes.
I had some conversations with people that said Michigan was never punished. I guess they don't view fines as a significant punishment. The other piece of this is that the offender is no longer at the university, right? Like Sharon Moore is gone. He's out. Like, that's the difference between what happened with the advanced scouting thing, where theoretically Sharon Moore, who deleted some text messages in conjunction with that whole thing, was going to remain on as the head coach. And he, in fact, is supposed to be suspended for the first game of the season. Right. That's meaningless now. But, the new staff at Michigan truly had absolutely nothing to do with this.
Right.
And so any sort of penalty that you would impose on Michigan, I guess, would just be directed to the institution itself. But none of the individuals involved in any of this really egregious behavior are still there.
Which is why I'm glad that we can transition from obviously the outside side to now we can focus on what to expect from this year. Kyle Whittingham comes into play. I thought this was the safest hire that Michigan could have had. I think it was the absolute correct hire. There was obviously talks about maybe you go back and go get Kalen DeBoer. Jed Fish was a dark horse, in my opinion. I didn't expect Whittingham to be on this list until I think just a few days before he officially took the job. He brings in Jason Beck, who's a phenomenal play caller. Jay Hill from BYU did a great job this past year with that defense, one of the best in the Big 12 the last 2 years. Jason Beck is the epitome of what a coordinator and a quarterback's coach is going to be for Bryce Underwood. Just look at what Devin Dampierre did the past 2 years whenever he was with him at New Mexico and at Utah. That offense was just dynamic with him at the helm. Turnovers were cut in half, much more mobile, was able to just be himself. What are you looking forward to seeing from Bryce Underwood in year 2 with an actual quarterback's coach and a coordinator that is going to not really be so run heavy like Chip Lindsey was all last year?
Yeah, no, I just, my expectations are through the roof. I'm so excited. I'm glad you noted a dedicated quarterbacks coach. That's not something that Bryce Underwood had before under Sharon Moore. And, speaking of Sharon Moore, to the extent anybody argues that what happened there affected play, it only did so negatively because he was clearly distracted, clearly not focused on the players, wrapped up in so much other crap to the detriment, really, of the football program. That is not true with this new staff. They are focused, they're locked in, they're disciplined. And Bryce Underwood and, frankly, the rest of the team will absolutely benefit from that. But there are a few other changes that I think are important that will really help Bryce Underwood. In addition to having Jason Beck at OC, we saw what he did with Devin Dampierre, absolutely unlocked him, took him to the next level. But last year, statistically, Bryce Underwood was one of the quarterbacks that was most impacted by drops in all of college football. Tom Fornelli ran the numbers. Look, we all watched it as Michigan fans. There was one receiver in particular that just seemed to drop the ball every single time it was thrown to him. It was terrible. And I think that really impacted Bryce. It impacted not only his stats, but his confidence, the morale of the team collectively. And that guy's gone. And in fact, I think we've really upgraded our wide receiver room. In particular, Andrew Marsh was a true freshman last year. We didn't see him until later in the season, but he was absolutely dynamic. I think he had 0 drops. And so Andrew Marsh going to be featured, I think, much more prominently in this offense. But then we bring in really terrific, he previously designated as a tight end, JJ Buchanan from Utah, now designated specifically as a wide receiver at Michigan. He is awesome, really physical, tough, great ball catcher. So I think JJ Buchanan is going to elevate this offense. And then Jamie French from Texas, really highly rated guy. We didn't see a lot of him at Texas last year. They obviously had other things going on at the receiver position. took Arch a while, honestly, to come online, in my view. But I think just the upgrades at wide receiver alone will really, really help Bryce Underwood, in addition to having a much more focused staff, a dedicated QB coach. And then I think play calling that's just a lot more favorable to Bryce's skills and gifts, right? We didn't see Bryce even run at all, basically, until the Nebraska game. I think the play calling was fairly conservative for him. That's not going to be the case under Jason Beck. We absolutely know that. So I expect to see a significant leap for Bryce Underwood in 2026. I'm so excited for it.
Do you think J.J. Buchanan ends up kind of being a tweener, coming out lining up on the line of scrimmage and being that extra tight end?
Yeah, I mean, Michigan loves the tight end position, right? So we have some good tight ends returning, but yeah, I think I could definitely see them using him in that fashion as well.
So here's what I kind of put together when I look at what you got from the portal. One of the guys that I think is going to be really, really phenomenal from the defensive side of the ball, I think despite you losing Derek Moore, who's a first-round draft pick this past year, John Henry Daly is going to be so much better. He probably is the best edge rusher that Michigan has had since Aiden Hutchinson was there.
Yeah.
Really love his tape. He reminds me so much of him. His first step is really, really impressive. He's a guy that's going to line up in a 3 and a 5, going to be a stand. I don't really see him being in a stand-up position, kind of on the depending on if there's a tight end or not. I expect him to be in a 3 or 4 point stance at all times, but he is quick off the football. Love his bend. I think he's a phenomenal athlete. I think that he's going to be one of those guys that just takes over the Big Ten on the defensive side of the ball. Led the Big 12 in sacks this past year. He's going to be a guy that I think is going to be really, really explosive, and he just gives you that extra edge. You're so much better at edge right now, even with a guy like Derek Moore who had 10 sacks this past year. I think you're going to get a lot more with a guy like John Henry Daly off the edge.
Yeah, that's assuming he's healthy. I know he had an Achilles injury. I think that's something that everybody's been watching. We didn't see him participate in spring practice, but I saw some footage of him a few weeks ago, maybe running around at practice. Looked strong, looked good. I mean, if we can get him, honestly, even at 80% health, it's going to be phenomenal. He's a total game wrecker. I know every Michigan fan was so psyched to see him come over from Utah. So, and I think he'll really bring with him. One of the things I love about Kyle Whittingham and Utah, and why I wanted Kyle Whittingham to succeed Jim Harbaugh, is just because of that toughness. They're just so dominant along the lines of scrimmage. They have such a tough physical mentality. They always have. That's why they, bullied the likes of USC and Oregon and Pac-12 for years, despite having far fewer resources. It's just that toughness. And John Henry Daly certainly exemplifies that. But I'm hoping he will also help set the tone for the rest of that Michigan defense.
Who do you expect to be an X factor on this team?
That's a great question. I think Buchanan. I think he's kind of flying under the radar because wasn't previously sort of listed as wide receiver, mostly tight end. But I think a lot of people probably haven't heard that name before, won't see him coming. The other X factor is, I don't really know if this is fair to say, that the highest rated running back in the class is an X factor, but Savion Hyder is expected to be incredible. All the reports about Savion Hyder just absolutely rave about him, not just his physical attributes and capability, but his work ethic, his mindset, the way he sort of reads the plays, his patience. Like, the expectations for Savion Hyder are very high. It's a name, I think, that outside of the Michigan fan base, a lot of people probably haven't heard before or won't be paying attention to. But I think he could absolutely step in as a true freshman and make a tremendous impact, especially in a Jason Beck offense, for sure.
You expect the option game to be a role this year?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's what I thought. I figured Bryce's mobility has got to get unleashed this year. I mean, he's too athletic of a quarterback to kind of be a drop back passer, and
And that's his style. Like he's not actually
right.
that. Like he's not Julian Satan, right? Like Julian Satan, gotta respect him, like incredibly accurate passer, aided by some pretty good wide receivers. But like that's not Bryce.
Now, when I was at Manning Passing Academy a couple weeks ago, I did talk to Julian. He said he was going to try to be more mobile this year.
That's the expectation for him, and I think he absolutely has to be because they just got exposed against Miami because he wasn't good enough at it. So I know Ryan Day has put it out there. That's their hope for Julian Sayin. I personally hope that he does not improve his mobility whatsoever. I would love to see John Henry Daly come out the line and just eat him up. But yeah, certainly his style is different. Bryce, though, we're going to need to rely on that mobility just because he hasn't developed as much as a passer yet.
Is there a position group that gives you any worries for this season?
I think there are some questions about our linebacker room. I mean, I think otherwise, we get Rod Moore back, hopefully at safety. That's going to be huge. I think the D line is looking really good. We've got some pretty good experience in the secondary and added some additional pieces. From Utah, we got Smith Snowden in. He's a big pickup. But yeah, I think the collectively, I think linebacker is a position group where we're sort of like, not so sure what's going to happen there. And that's historically for Michigan been a really impactful position group. We've had some really great linebackers come through that have made a big difference. So hopefully we can get that sorted.
When you look at the schedule, what's the biggest game that you think is going to impact Michigan's season the most, or really the game that will define 2026 for Michigan?
You have to say the game, right? I mean, it is the Ohio State game. This year it is in Columbus. The last two times we've been in Columbus, we've won that game. Inexplicably, we won it in 2024. I still, to this day, do not know how the hell we pulled that off. But that's the most important game every year for Michigan. It will be the most important game this year. Aside from that, though, I mean, that's the easy answer. I think when we get Indiana at home, it will be really interesting. I've got some concerns about traveling to Oregon to play Oregon and Autzen. Just it's a tough road environment. It's kind of later in the season. In my view, would be shocked to see us come out of Eugene with the win, but we do get Indiana at home, and I think we get them at home either before or after they play Ohio State, which could make them a little bit more vulnerable. I think that's going to be a really meaningful litmus test for Michigan this year. So that's the one I think.
I got two for you.
All
Oklahoma
right.
game, second week of the year.
Oh, God. I forgot.
At Ann Arbor.
Oklahoma game. Yeah.
You're expecting an Oklahoma team that's probably going to have a top 5 D line this year. David Stone's going to be one of the best interior defensive linemen in the country. You're going up. You have an offensive line that is going to get better. I think the interior was a group that definitely was a strong point this past year. And in my opinion, I thought that Michigan should have been a finalist for a Joe Moore Award this past year. That run offense was probably the best in college football. When you have both of your guys and guys like Jordan Marshall and then Justice Haynes, both of them combined, when they're averaging just over 7 yards a carry between the two, I think that says something about how the Hogs in the middle run, the way they communicate, the way they just work together. I think it's really important that in that area, you got to win the line of scrimmage against Oklahoma. And then here's an interesting one. On the road against Minnesota, Drake Lindsey's going to be one of the better dual threat quarterbacks this year. Got to talk with him as well. He's a guy that I think his game is about to be so much more wide open. He's a really, really dynamic quarterback. I wish he had more pieces around him. That's why I think that Minnesota could be a more of a consistent 8 or 9 win team if they can just find the pieces to surround a guy like Drake Lindsey with. It's really going to be intriguing to me seeing how the back seven does with his mobility, with his ability to create plays despite being under pressure. I think if you get past Oklahoma after September 12th, I think you should be in a really good position. That game against Ohio State again could be for a chance to get back to the college football playoff. I really believe that this would be a much better season. Even if you go 9-3, I think that Michigan has the pieces to build around. They have the guys that they can build a solid roster under. Whittingham is still one of the more dynamic coaches in college football. Probably, in my opinion, the most underappreciated coach and is the most consistent coach in college football. Him at the helm, you are able to keep your coordinators for 2027. The run for a playoff pick, the run to the playoff is going to be very, very real, and a team that I think could end up being a top 10 team when it's all said and done. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think 2027, we could absolutely shoot for a national title. Bryce Underwood will be in his third year. Andrew Marsh will be in his third year. Savion Hyder will be in his second year. We're going to be stacked in 2027 for sure. 2026, we're going to be better than we were last year.
Right.
I'm 100% sure of that, just based on the development. You talk about the O-line, Michigan's O-line last year, I was not all that impressed with. My expectations are much higher this year. A lot of our O-line tried to hit the portal. Whittingham saved them. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he brings in Jim Harding as the O-line coach. That guy sends players to the league. 2 first-round draft picks off Utah's O-line last year in this most recent draft. So if you're an offensive lineman, you're at Michigan, Jim Harding is coming in, hell yeah, sign me up. So I think our O-line, I expect to be quite a bit better this year. I was, like I said, a little disappointed last year. I think this year is going to be quite a bit better. We also, I want to note, I think our strength and conditioning is going to be a lot better too. We bring over Utah's strength and conditioning coach. I've already talked about how Utah just manages to be a tougher, more physical team. I think we lost that when we lost Ben Herbert in 2024 when he went with Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers. I think we're going to upgrade our strength and conditioning across the program. So even if we don't make it to the college football playoff this year, which I think actually there is a realistic chance that Michigan does make the CFP this year, I think 2027 we truly have a chance to win a natty.
I feel like this past year, it just didn't seem like everything was just clicking. You win 9 games, but it didn't feel like it was a good 9-win year. This year, I feel much differently. Even if you finish 9-3 at the end of the year, I think that you're going to be a much more improved team, like you mentioned already. And like I mentioned as well, you're building towards the future, which is what you have right now. It's a young team, but I think that you have the pieces in place so that you can solidify yourselves back into that playoff picture like you were with Harbaugh at the helm. Miss Michelle, we appreciate your time being here on the Southern Sports Scene. Where can we find some of your good work, some of your best takes on the socials?
I am all on X or Twitter or whatever people are calling it these days. My handle is MichelleK4040, and that's where you can find me. That's the one and only place.
Michelle, we appreciate your time. Guys, thank you for hopping on Inside the Southern Sports Scene, talking some ball with us. Make sure you do us a favor and hit the like, share, and subscribe down below. Turn on the bell notifications so that you are notified every time we go live, posting a video or posting a short here on the Southern Sports Scene. And as always, ladies and gents, stay blessed, don't stress. Y'all have a great rest of the week.